Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way.
Hello, so today we'll be covering digital art, and I remember getting really confused when I first looked into digital art. Maybe you're in the same boat, so this video is going to be a brief guide on all the knowledge you need to get started and choose your first tool. Like the intro said, I'll be covering hardware and software in separate portions of this video, so you can script to the timestamps if you just want the software bit, or you can stick around for the whole thing if you want this whole spiel of digital art and how to get started and buy hardware for it. So without any further ado, let us get started. Digital art can be a huge maze to navigate, starting from seeing art on the internet. Even if you look at what your favorite artists use, it'll be pretty obvious very quickly that there are a lot of options, and these options can be very hard to narrow down, especially if you haven't had any experience with like drawing digitally or even working on a computer too much. So we'll be looking at all the types of devices you can get as a beginner and what is best for you. Digital art is done on tablets, and there are a few different kinds of these. While digital art tablets are very varied in what they do is pretty similar, but it's a little bit different if you're used to traditional art, which you probably are. You might think because digital devices are surfaces and pens that they are the digital equivalent of drawing on paper with pencil versus on canvas with like oil paint or something. But it's not really like that. Digital tablets are more like input methods. While most art apps and programs have the ability to mimic traditional art, as you probably have seen, such as use watercolor brushes or Copic marker colors, having one tablet or the other doesn't really change what brushes or what programs you can use. But it's still important to know all the different kinds of tablets there are, so you can pick the one that's right for you. So let's divide this into a few categories first. They're mainly divided like this. 1. Digital display tablets. 2. Drawing pads. Drawing pads are fairly simple, so let's get into them later. But as for the first one, digital display tablets are divided into even more categories. To make it easier, let's call them A. Pen displays, B. Computers and mobile tablets. Those are the categories. Now let's look at what they specifically are. Digital display tablets are basically tablets that allow you to draw on a screen or display. These are basically like drawing on paper, but instead of paper you draw on a screen. These are quite expensive because of the large screens and some of the functions they can do. And there are two main kinds of these. A. Pen displays, like I said earlier, basically mean they don't actually work without a computer. They're just displays, like the name suggests. These have to be plugged into a computer with cables or plugged into a different device that has a processor and an ability to run art programs to work on this thing. So these are basically tablets from Wacom and Helion. There are a few of these out there that you can use under different brands, but they pretty much do the same thing, and you need a computer to make them work. And B is pen computers and mobile. This is probably the category of tablets you've seen the most on the internet, because this includes iPads, Galaxy tablets, or anything that works with a stylus and pressure sensitivity, and it doesn't actually require an extra computer or an extra device to make this work. This will work on its own because they have processors and everything inside them. They're both pro and beginner devices in this category, and they tend to be really expensive. Before looking into what you might want, let's look into the other type of tablets you've probably seen, and that is our second category, drawing pads. Drawing pads don't have screens, and they're basically just mice with pressure sensitivity. And because of that, they need to be connected to a computer or a phone to be used, just like the pen displays, but they don't have a display. But these also kind of require, because they don't have a display, you can't just draw on the place you want to draw. You have to coordinate it like you would coordinate a mouse. So it requires some degree of getting used to, and this is tiny learning curve. You might be wondering right about now that I've only talked about the surfaces you draw in when it comes to digital art and not the actual pens. So why is that? Well, let's first explain one thing. Pressure sensitivity is a word that you probably heard and it gets thrown around all the time, which confuses a lot of beginner artists as to what to exactly get. But it's pretty simple, it's really not that complex. Basically, when you apply pressure on a pencil, when you draw on a piece of paper, you get a harder, darker, thicker line. So pressure sensitivity is basically simulating that digitally. So when you're choosing a stylus, it's better to pick one with at least 4096 levels of pressure, which are most styluses. Anything above that is amazing. Now that you know what pressure sensitivity is, let's look into what would be good for you. You're pretty spoiled for choice, honestly, when it comes to what you can pick. But a few factors you must consider before buying a tablet is what you're going to be using it for and whether it suits your lifestyle. If you're a student on a budget, maybe don't blow your life savings on a $4,000 Cintiq, is what I'm basically saying. What I can personally recommend everyone start with is a smaller screenless drawing pad. You can get these from Huion as well as Wacom and a few other companies like XP Pen. The cool thing about these are they're very, very cheap, they're extremely cheap, and they work with pretty much any display device like Windows laptops, Android phones, or MacBooks. The cons of getting them though are that there's a little bit of a learning curve, like I mentioned earlier, and to get used to the actual device takes a little bit of time, and to get used to the software takes a little bit of time as well using this device. So it's a pretty steep learning curve. The first time I got a screenless drawing pad, I got used to the pad itself in about 2 days. I recommend drawing a lot of circles on MS Paint or any sort of basic software you have on your computer already installed to get used to the hand-eye coordination if you do end up buying one of these. But if you're on a bit of a higher budget, you can look into getting a tablet with a screen. These can go from a few $100s to a couple thousand. If you are a creative professional or a student looking to get into a creative field, you can go directly for a pen tablet from Huion or Wacom. Alternatively, you can also get an iPad or a Galaxy tablet with a stylus if art isn't the only thing you use your device for. That's pretty much the basics of hardware. Now let's move into software. Software is a little bit more meticulous and time consuming than choosing the hardware you need, but now that you've gotten your drawing tablet, you need a program that will help you get really comfortable with what you want to draw. For starters, these vary from device to device, although most of them do the same thing but with small specialization. So I'm going to list the ones that I've used. Clip Studio Paint is my main software that I've used on all my videos almost, and it's the one that I'm most comfortable. If you want a software that works on most devices and most OSs, this is a really affordable option. Clip Studio Paint is a software made for comics, illustrations, and animations. So it covers a whole breadth of things you might want to do with your tablet. It is a pretty complex software to master, but it really doesn't take long to get started. You can pretty much use just an afternoon and a few tutorials and be on your way to creating good art. The second one is Photoshop. Photoshop is notorious for being expensive because it's a subscription-based service, but you can also get Photoshop in other ways, and if you're a student, you might get a huge discount from your university or school that you attend. And this might also be the case if you work for a company that specializes in some form of digital creative media. Photoshop is a software by Adobe that is mainly used to edit photos, like the name suggests, but it's also very largely and professionally used to make digital art. If you're looking into a career in digital art, this is an excellent option if you can afford it to get started and to get used to. It is brilliant for anyone who wants to get into concept art or anything that requires custom brushes or a lot of resources. This is an amazing software for that. The third one I'm going to talk about specifically is two softwares actually, Procreate and Infinity Painter. Procreate and Infinity Painter are apps for the iPad and Android respectively that are basically art programs condensed to work on a non-desktop environment. These use gestures and touchscreen actions to substitute for the keyboard that you would have on a computer or a pen computer. For art, these work pretty much the same way, just the same way that Photoshop and Clip Studio does, but with a much cleaner UI design and generally just easier navigation on a touchscreen. Other than these three main things, I can also recommend pretty confidently Krita, Paint.si, Open Canvas, Medibank Paint, and Autodesk Sketchbook. These work on different OSs respectively, but some are available across the board, and all of them are great to get started with. That is it for the 2D drawing programs I wanted to talk about for a beginner at digital art. So hopefully that was helpful to you. And before we close off this video though, I also want to mention some 3D apps in case you were looking into 3D modeling. To go through this really quick, Blender is a all-round awesome app that lets you do pretty much anything you want to in terms of 3D modeling. All around a really great app that is free also, quite surprisingly, so that's very awesome. But if you want to get into more high-end stuff or more heavy stuff, or you're looking for a